Linkin Park. They're often referred to as one of the greatest rock bands of the 21st century, and it's not hard to see why. Linkin Park brought countless eyes and ears to the genre of nu metal, effortlessly blending elements of rock, hip-hop, and electronic music into a trademark sound that could only be described as theirs. Whereas the likes of Limp Bizkit and Korn pioneered the genre in the 90s, I'd argue that Linkin Park is the band that perfected nu metal, constantly innovating on the genre and pushing the boundaries of what a rock song could possibly be. And while I do consider myself a pretty big fan of Linkin Park, to the point where I've listened to most of their albums at least once in my lifetime, I don't often find myself returning to a lot of their songs besides the really big ones that everybody knows. That being said, with today being the 25-year anniversary of Hybrid Theory, and with the 1-year anniversary of From Zero just around the corner, it seemed like the perfect time to finally talk about this band. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, because I listened to every single Linkin Park album, so you don't have to. Oh, and if I can bug you for a little bit, if you wouldn't mind taking a second to subscribe to the channel, we are really pushing to hit 1,000 subs by the end of the year, and I think it just might be possible. So if you have a minute, just sub to the channel. It's free. You can always change your mind later if you hate my content down the road. Thank you very much, and enjoy the video. In the year 2000, I was a baby. Little did I know that while I was working on my fine motor skills and my potty training, Linkin Park would be working on their debut studio album, Hybrid Theory. If you know anything about rock and alternative music in the last 25 years, you know that this is one impactful album. In past videos, I've used Hybrid Theory as sort of a reference point for solid or exceeding expectations debut albums, and there's a good reason for that. Hybrid Theory was a game changer on the alt-rock sphere. Beyond anything, it was an innovative album. Linkin Park wasn't the first artist or band to blend rap and rock, don't get me wrong, but adding such a prominent electronic touch into the mix led to such a grand payoff to the band, one that would shoot them to international levels of fame. Right from the get-go, Linkin Park's lyricism is something that we absolutely need to take note of. Hybrid Theory came out swinging, packed full of songs discussing depression and addiction, among other heavy topics. Now, it's safe to say that these lyrics are already masterfully written, but what breathes new life into them and really brings this entire album to life is the dual performances from Mike Shinoda and Chester Bennington. Now look, I will be the first to say that I am a sucker for bands with multiple vocalists. It turns songs into conversations and generally lets bands get a lot more creative with how they approach songwriting and melodies. There are few musical duos out there, however, that eclipse the iconic nature of Chester Bennington and Mike Shinoda. These two vocalists play off of each other on almost every damn song, and they make it look so effortless every time they do it. The great thing about them too is that each vocalist complements the other and pushes them forward. If Chester has a really aggressive and angsty performance, Mike is usually paralleling it with something on the calmer, more somber side, and vice versa. The band thrives when it comes to creating duality in their music, and Hybrid Theory is no exception to that rule. Hybrid Theory is an album that I also praise on its tone and pacing. Through and through, this is a dark and gritty album, airing out a lot of dismal thoughts from all of the band members. These songs get pretty dismal. Hybrid Theory is a very heavy album, but like I've mentioned in previous videos, sometimes it helps to know that you're not the only one going through these things, and in the case of Linkin Park, that has never been more clear. Linkin Park captures that sensation perfectly, not only through their music, but also their sense of community, something that they've built for the last 25 years, ever since Hybrid Theory came out. With the general overview out of the way, let's finally talk about Hybrid Theory's 4 singles, those being One Step Closer, Crawling, Paper Cut, and In the End. Normally, it does take us a little longer to find my favorite song from an artist in these videos, but that's not the case with Linkin Park, because Paper Cut is my favorite song of all time from them. Oh my god. If you've never heard a Linkin Park song before, or even if you've never tackled a full project from them, this song feels like an explosion of color, a sensation of being given a song or a musical style that you never realized you were missing in your life. But now that it's there, you have no idea how you could ever go back. The way Paper Cut starts sends chills through me every time I listen to it. The beat pad drums into the sharply distorted guitar, all leading up to everybody's entrances, is grand and epic to say the least. On top of that, the blending of styles in this track is crazy. Linkin Park makes the fusion of rap and metal feel so effortless, so smooth, in ways that were probably unimaginable before this album came out. Paper Cut also serves to set pacing and tone in a pretty effective fashion. Like I've mentioned, Hybrid Theory is a pretty aggressive and bleak album, and Paper Cut kickstarts that tone perfectly. You can make a really good album, but if your opening track to that album sucks, it can be enough to just turn off a listener completely and not give the project a fair shot. Linkin Park does not need to worry about that with Hybrid Theory. Paper Cut is an explosion of a start to the album. Directly following Paper Cut, however, is One Step Closer, a song that keeps pacing moving and tone consistent as the record continues. I think I always just assumed that In the End was the lead single to this album with how big of a song it is, but One Step Closer is a pretty good choice too. Whereas Paper Cut puts Mike's rapping in the spotlight, One Step Closer is where we really get a glimpse at Chester's vocals for the first time. If you've ever heard a Linkin Park song, and let's be real, you have, I do not need to remind you of just how unique and moving Chester's performances are, balancing melodic emotion with furious aggression, and that is all on display for the world to see in the form of One Step Closer. All right, so I'll admit I've been stalling. There's a song in these singles that we do really need to talk about because, well, it's their biggest song. Let's talk about In the End. Now look, you might be tired of hearing the song by now, and it's personally one that I've been burnt out on for a while, but it's really exciting me on these most recent listens. With how effortlessly Mike and Chester play off of one another, it's pretty easy to see just how this song blew up in the ways it did. Chester's vocals on this track are especially moving, once again finding the perfect balance between those aggressive growls and silky verses. I think it's pretty safe to say that In the End has withstood the test of time and is hugely responsible for solidifying Linkin Park as a household nu metal name. While these singles are amazing, that's not to say Hybrid Theory is carried by them or that Hybrid Theory is front-loaded in any way. The other songs on this album are so good, so consistent, starting with Points of Authority. Points of Authority has a great balance of aggression and melodicism in Chester's performance, and the verses feel so composed and under control, with each chorus feeling like an explosion of pressure and angst. As you can probably assume, dynamics play a large role in this, where the band juggles soft and loud to accentuate specific moments in the song. Mike's bridge is also incredibly sick, giving the song a faster feel as we keep up with his bars and fly into the close of the song. Points of Authority isn't one that I've gone back to all that frequently, but it's probably gonna change with this video. I've been listening to this song a lot. With You, on the other hand, is a song with some haunting production. I don't know what these shrill sounds are across the entire song, but they feel so spectral, helping to sell the dire nature and tone of the song. Chester's scratchy vocals also really help to sell the tone. With You is just such a diverse song, blending elements of rock, hip-hop, and electronic, a combination that sounds overwhelming on paper, but proved to be a successful innovation on the music sphere. Now let's take a second and speed things up, switch the pacing up a little bit with Runaway. The other songs on Hybrid Theory haven't necessarily been slow, but Runaway feels way more upbeat than anything we've heard yet. As subtle as it is, the song works as an effective change in pacing for the album, something that I think works incredibly. Another subtle detail I like is Mike's performance in each pre-chorus. As brief as it is, I love the back and forth it provides for the song. A Place for My Head is, frankly, impossible to not bop my head along to the moment Mike starts rapping. His flow on this track is electric and catchy to a T, a song that I feel like would be incredibly satisfying to learn for karaoke. Chester's breakdown is also insane, with drums that feel dramatic and cinematic to emphasize his powerful screams. A Place for My Head also transitions so smoothly into Forgotten, what I'd call a pretty by-the-numbers nu metal track, but that's not to say it's a bad song in any way whatsoever. If anything, it feels reminiscent of a Limp Bizkit song in terms of production and vocals. Chester almost perfectly emulates that sort of whiny Fred Durst sound on Forgotten. Paired with those whiny vocals and aggressive Shinoda bars, however, are melodic vocals in each chorus. All things considered, I don't have a lot of things to say about Forgotten. I just really love the heavier instrumental on this song. It just sounds so badass. And of course, we cannot talk about this album without talking about Pushing Me Away, the song that closes out Hybrid Theory in a cinematic and emotional fashion. It feels incredibly reminiscent of Numb in terms of flow and production. I mean, just listen to how this song flows from verse into chorus. It sounds eerily similar to Numb. Pushing Me Away is yet another track that takes a lot of electronic influence, something that Linkin Park will definitely expand on later in their career. All things considered, Pushing Me Away is an incredible close to an incredible debut record. All right, this is the point in the video where we talk about the low points of Hybrid Theory, so let's do that right now. All right, we have successfully talked about the low points of Hybrid Theory, so let's move on. On a real note, even Hybrid Theory's lowest points carry so much emotional depth and musical innovation on them, a stark contrast from basically every other album we've listened to in this entire series. If there is a low point for me on Hybrid Theory, it's probably Crawling, but I don't even consider it a low point because it's still such a powerful and influential song on the genre. And that just about sums up my notes on Hybrid Theory. I had some pretty high expectations coming back into this album. And let me tell you, Hybrid Theory delivered on all of those expectations. To be clear, this is an album I listened to before, and it's probably the Linkin Park album that I've listened to the most over the years. But it's also one that feels like it has aged beautifully since the year 2000. If by some chance you haven't ever listened to Hybrid Theory, I heavily encourage you to give it a shot if you're looking for something new, because I can tell you what, you're not gonna be disappointed. In 2003, 3 years after their explosive debut, Linkin Park's sophomore album, Meteora, was released to the public. Dare I say that this is just as good as Hybrid Theory? Now, this is another album that I've heard prior to the start of this video, but it's one that I often forget to return to. And every time I do, I am swiftly reminded that Meteora is somehow just as consistent as Hybrid Theory, while still serving as an opportunity for Linkin Park to evolve and grow on the sound that they innovated on 3 years prior. While it is very similar in tone and sound to Hybrid Theory, you can also see the band diversifying their sound on Meteora. It shows the band starting to lean more into an electronic influence, and this was present on Hybrid Theory, don't get me wrong, but I think it was a lot more subtle on that album than it is on Meteora. The electronic influence on Linkin Park's sound is only going to get stronger over the years, and Meteora feels like the tip of the iceberg, the very start of that, which is pretty cool to see. It also has what I think I would call a heavier metal influence. Like, it definitely feels like a bit of a more aggressive record, if that makes sense, but that's just me. I might be talking to my man. Meteora is composed of 5 singles, those being Somewhere I Belong, Faint, Numb, From the Inside, and Breaking the Habit. One of these sticks out like a sore thumb, but we'll get to that later. The one that I actually want to start with is Faint. Admittedly, this is a song that took quite a long time to grow on me, but now that it has, oh my god, this is one of my favorite Linkin Park songs ever. Personally, I love how intense of a song Faint is, with this haunting intro and high-octane pacing. Mike's flow is also insane on this song, and it flows perfectly into Chester's fast and aggressive choruses and breakdown. I've never been a huge fan of anime music videos on YouTube, but I can definitely see Faint getting paired with Naruto fights. It just makes sense, dude. Breaking the Habit, on the other hand, is one of those songs that always catches me off guard on every listen to Meteora. It feels like such a stark contrast to the more aggressive moments of the album. I love that Chester's smoother side gets a chance to shine on this song. I love his growls and his screams, of course, but this just feels so different and composed, something we haven't really seen from him thus far. Breaking the Habit feels reminiscent of so many songs from later in their career where melodic vocals get a chance to shine over angsty growls, and Breaking the Habit is a great first taste of that vibe. We're going to return to the singles in a little bit because I do have a few more things to say about them, but for now let's talk about Don't Stay, the opening track of Meteora. While I do find it to be a pretty safe opening track and one that I definitely enjoy less than Paper Cut, it is still an amazing start in terms of tone and pacing for Meteora. Don't Stay is yet another track that sounds like it could have been a Hybrid Theory B-side, but still establishes a unique tone and tempo in the context of Meteora. I don't think it's the band's best paced track ever, but Don't Stay is good enough to kickstart this new album and era, so that's good enough for me. On the other hand, From the Inside is a song with a lot of good traits, but I want to start with its placement on the track list. This feels like the perfect track to directly follow Breaking the Habit, following a lot more of those same smoother melodic vocals with a gradual incline back into Linkin Park's heavier sound. Beyond just its placement on Meteora, however, I love the 3 feel on From the Inside. It feels like an angsty waltz in a ballroom with Linkin Park as the live band directing our dance. Does that make sense? Does anyone else get that vibe? On my first listen of Meteora 3 years ago, one of the songs that I initially gravitated towards was Figure 9. It's not one that I go back to all that often these days, but every time I do, it catches me off guard in the best way possible. Figure 9 also feels like it could have fit in perfectly in Hybrid Theory, with its cinematic and gradual intro, some effective back and forth between Chester and Mike, and an explosive bridge that throws me right back into Hybrid Theory. Even with its similarities to that album and its sound, Figure 9 still fits in perfectly on Meteora and never feels like it disrupts the tone or pacing of the project that it's on. In a similar vein to Figure 9, Nobody's Listening is a track that blows me away anytime I listen to Meteora. Holy cow, the production on this backing track is insane, reminding me of that flute intro of Green Day's Extraordinary Girl. While Nobody's Listening doesn't necessarily feature my favorite vocals from either Mike or Chester, I love the way that they bounce off one another, not to mention how they're complemented by the production of the track, which is almost reminiscent of Itch for the Cure to me. The pacing on the song is sort of weird and sluggish for my tastes, but I don't think it's all that offensive. It's not too bad. Alright, it's time to dip back into our singles. Let's talk about the one that you have all been waiting for, Numb. What a closing track, oh my lord. This one still gives me chills to this day, and I'm sure that I'm not alone with that. Numb is quite possibly the quintessential Linkin Park song, and while it does have fewer streams than In the End, I do think it's the better track of the two. Once again, Numb is an example of perfectly balancing musical storytelling with insane musicianship. The production is breathtaking, the lyrics are moving, the vocal performances are out of this world. There's no short list of good things you can say about Numb, and I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the remix of this track featuring Jay-Z, which has become the de facto way the band starts the song in live performances over the years. It's admittedly a collaboration that I never would have predicted myself, but an awesome, genre-defying performance nonetheless. And if we're talking about Meteora, we might as well talk about Lost, a Volta track that got released just 2 years ago for the album's 20th anniversary. If I remember correctly, Lost was excluded from Meteora because of its similarities to Numb, and I can absolutely see why that would be the case. I personally hear it most in this intro, with initially reserved electronic sampling, followed by a grand introduction of guitars and drums, and then a decay into Chester's vocals. Even with how Mike's rapping is very subtly incorporated into Lost, makes it sound so similar to Numb. That being said, I'm incredibly glad that we have this track today. It was cool to see Linkin Park back on the charts before their reunion was even publicized. Now, if you can believe it, just like Hybrid Theory, Meteora is an album that I consider to have 0 skips whatsoever. Linkin Park hit the studio and came out with a project that's just as solid as their last one, if not a more mature project. That's pretty difficult to do, think about that, but if anyone's gonna do it, I guess it would be Linkin Park. Sadly, in my opinion, they weren't really able to keep the momentum going. Linkin Park's third studio album, Minutes to Midnight, would be released in May of 2007, 4 years after Meteora. As I hinted, I do think that this is a step down. Yeah, I'm admittedly not so crazy about this album. Whereas I revisit Meteora and I'm kind of surprised with how much I enjoy that project, Minutes to Midnight is pretty much the exact opposite, where I force myself to try it time and time again, and I'm just left kind of feeling underwhelmed. And I've thought about it during this video, during this production, and I've come to find that there are 2 main reasons for my distaste with Minutes to Midnight. Reason number 1 would be the track ordering. I've always felt like this album would benefit from a different ordering of tracks. There are certain runs on this album, especially in the first half, that feel so dissonant and jarring on a song-to-song basis. You'll go from ludicrous speeds to grinding halts in mere seconds, something that I personally find to be incredibly distracting. As a result, pacing on the album is really weird and off-putting, and I find Minutes to Midnight to be a sort of difficult record to appreciate. And reason number 2, the production. Now, before we jump to any conclusions, let me preface by saying that Minutes to Midnight is an album with good production. It's just not as innovative as I would hope. Hybrid Theory and Meteora were such exciting projects because they felt like experimentations. Every song saw Linkin Park pushing the boundary further on what a rock song could be, and I feel like that is missing from Minutes to Midnight. It feels like it lacks the innovation and creativity that I've grown to appreciate on those first 2 albums, and it feels like it really plays it safe as a radio rock album. Like I said though, that doesn't mean that this is a flat out poorly produced album. I actually do think they get a little creative here and there with their use of percussion, especially in the form of human percussion like claps and body slaps and whatnot. So that's a plus for me. Anyways, that is way more than enough whining for now. Let's talk about Minutes to Midnight's 5 singles. Those being What I've Done, Bleed It Out, Shadow of the Day, Given Up, and Leave Out All the Rest. While not my favorite selection of tracks, it's still a solid selection regardless. Of these, the track that I immediately gravitate towards is What I've Done. Thanks in part to Michael Bay, this is a song that has been memed to hell and back, but that doesn't necessarily mean it lacks staying power or quality. What I've Done feels like an incredibly cinematic song to me, especially with its intro, so I guess it makes sense that it would end up on the big screen in one way or another. Another aspect of the song that fuels this, however, are Chester's vocals, which swell so brilliantly from verse to chorus. It's not necessarily an aggressive or angsty song, but that doesn't make Chester's performance any less meaningful or moving. God, this song is so damn good! Bleed It Out is yet another track off of Minutes that has withstood the test of time, albeit one that I wasn't initially very fond of. Personally, I think Bleed It Out is a great song for Mike, with faster raps that remind you immediately of Faint. I'm also personally quite fond of the tambourine on the song, an instrument that I normally wouldn't pay all that much attention to, but one that works incredibly effectively in this context. It almost reminds me of Heavy Dirty Soul by 21 Pilots and how it pushes the pacing and tempo forward. I used to have my reservations towards Bleed It Out, but now I get the hype, and I completely understand how it would make for an effective closer of any live show. And while Given Up isn't necessarily my favorite song on the entire album, it's still a song with power regardless, and I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. I think Given Up uses its dynamics really creatively, opting for sudden changes from soft to loud with each chorus instead of swelling up. I, of course, also do need to mention Chester's insane breakdown preceding the final chorus of the song because holy moly. If this moment of giving up doesn't send chills down your spine, I recommend seeing a doctor to make sure your nerve endings aren't damaged, because they very well might be with how the song goes. To round out our discussion of singles, let's talk about Shadow of the Day. This song is a great example of easing into a tempo change instead of getting blindsided by it. Following Bleed It Out, Shadow of the Day definitely slows things down a bit, but still has a lot of fluidity and motion to it, with a prominent drum beat and vibrant string section to keep things moving. I also really adore Chester's vocals on this song. He has such a beautiful and smooth performance from start to finish. Going from this song into What I've Done isn't the cleanest transition whatsoever, but it works better than some that we'll talk about later. For now, Shadow of the Day is a great track. Now, we're gonna kind of pause for a second. I'm gonna go on a tangent and talk about politics. It always makes me laugh when commenters online ask the question of, when did insert artist here become so political? When they've been like actively political in their music for years. I see this most with Green Day, where every few months the band does like the exact same thing on stage that they've been doing for the last like 10 years at this point, and a whole new wave of right-wing neckbeards come out of the woodwork to ask where this could possibly be coming from when Green Day made an album called American Idiot. What I'm trying to say is that Linkin Park is never a band that I've considered to be one with a political voice. But I've also never really immersed myself in their deeper music, songs such as Hands Held High, a song that, for better or for worse, is all too relevant in this day and age. While peaceful in tone, with soft organs and spacey guitars creating a song that sounds like it belongs in a church, Mike's lyrics starkly contrast this tone, filled with anger and frustration towards ignorant and malicious politicians. If the choir in the chorus singing Amen doesn't send chills through you, once again, I either need you to check out a doctor or I literally don't know what to tell you. Hands Held High is one moving song, and I highly recommend you give it a shot if somehow you haven't yet. No More Sorrow is another gut punch of a song for Minutes. This equally feels like a track that I'd mosh to, as well as a song that Vikings would play to get through a brutal storm as they sail through the Baltic Sea. The guitar and the drums might be overbearing for some, but for me, they're the perfect level of intensity. I also love the background harmonies in the chorus alongside Chester's bold vocals. I thought I had something else to say there, but I don't have anything written on my script, so this is now a transition into the next song. With that, we arrive at the songs off of Minutes to Midnight that I am not so fond of, and for once, I've actually got some stuff written in this category. Let's start with Wake, the opening track of Minutes to Midnight that just feels jarring to me. Wake feels incredibly dissonant, lined up right next to Given Up. The transition between these two songs doesn't feel natural to me whatsoever. Whereas Wake is a cinematic track that feels like the start of a movie, Given Up is aggressive and somewhat disorderly, and the tracks don't go well together at all. I genuinely think that Minutes to Midnight would have had a better start if it just opened with Given Up, or if a different track was moved in front of Wake, but for future listens, Wake is a track that I will be skipping, unfortunately. Leave Out the Rest is another song that I'm not too crazy for, once again, for its placement on the track list. The song feels really awkward, sandwiched between Given Up and Bleed It Out, two kind of aggressive, adrenaline-fueled, drum-driven songs. Leave Out All the Rest feels a lot more composed and somber, which is fine for that song in the context of a standalone single, but in the greater context of Minutes to Midnight, the track sticks out like a sore thumb to me. It feels like it pulls me out of my immersion. And finally, to round out our rough songs, we need to talk about In Between. I want to love this song so bad, I really do, because Mike's singing voice is so damn good on the song, but no dice for me. Personally, In Between is a song that feels like it drags for its entire run. There isn't a moment of pressure release that makes me feel rewarded for sticking at the track, and it does feel incredibly jarring following the heavier Valentine's Day, which I think could have been remedied by just swapping In Between and In Pieces on the track list. At the end of the day though, that's just my preference. No hate to you if In Between is your song. Alright, well, for better or for worse, I'm done talking about Minutes to Midnight, and before we move on, I want to kind of hammer a point home real quick. If Minutes is your album, if you disagree with any of my critiques or anything that I've said in this video, that's totally fine. Music is an art form, it's subjective, it's meant to be opinionated. I've always thought that what's most important to music is what the listener finds in it, not what some random schmuck says on the internet. So if you disagree, I understand. We can always do that respectfully and constructively. So don't take anything I say too seriously, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. All right, let's move on. Hey, if I could bug you just once more in this video, if you really like the content, I think you should consider joining my Discord server. It is the best way that you can stay up to date with my content, and I even post teasers for new videos that you won't find anywhere else. Not on social media, not on YouTube, nowhere else but the Discord server. It's also a great way to meet other viewers of the channel. We share music, we send memes, and at some point, I would love to do a community game night. So if you don't want to miss out on any of that, click the link in the description, join the Discord server, and let's get some chats going. On another note, if I can bug you one final time, leave a comment on this video with your favorite Halloween song, no matter how big or how small it is. I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks so much, let's get back into some Linkin Park. 3 years after the release of Minutes to Midnight, Linkin Park's fourth studio album, 1,000 Suns, would be released. I've got some thoughts about this one. Now, I'm not nearly involved enough in the Linkin Park fandom or discussions or anything like that to say what standing this album, or any album for that matter, has, but off rip, 1,000 Suns feels like it could be one divisive album. In the past, Linkin Park has messed around with that electronic influence on projects like Meteora and Hybrid Theory, but this is the first time that it has truly been at the front lines as a core influence of the project. For many who have been longtime fans of the band, following it for the last 10 years, I can see how this kind of stark and out of the blue style change might be off-putting, but personally, I think it's mostly executed pretty well. It's been a while since Linkin Park's delivered something different or diverse, and that's exactly what I love about 1,000 Suns. It's something that I have never heard before. The vocals on this album are also an incredible high point for me, and that's not to say that they've ever been bad on past Linkin Park albums, but you can really see the growth over 10 years for both Mike and Chester. As far as pacing is concerned though, yeah, there's kind of a bit left to be desired. There are a few interlude-like tracks that really help the album flow seamlessly from start to finish, but most of the real songs on 1,000 Suns are near the 4-minute mark, and that's not to say a 4-minute song is inherently bad or paced poorly. In the case of 1,000 Suns, I think a lot of the songs tend to overstay their welcome. Once again, I have spent more than enough time complaining and yapping, so let's move into the 4 singles of 1,000 Suns. Those being The Catalyst, Waiting for the End, Burning in the Skies, and Iridescent. If any one song is going to introduce your fan base into a new and experimental style, The Catalyst is certainly a way to get the job done. While I personally feel like the song pales in comparison to every other lead single thus far, it's a fine pick nonetheless. The electronic influence doesn't feel like it was forced in any way, and while certain points of the song do feel like they struggle to hold my interest, and it feels like a minute or two could be chopped off for the song to make it flow better, The Catalyst is still a great kickstart to this new era of Linkin Park. It's a great introduction to this new sound. Another single that I really ended up enjoying was Burning in the Skies, which is technically not the opening track, but it's what I consider to be the opening track of 1,000 Suns. And what a way to start off the record. The extended intro created by the Requiem and the Radiance are powerful as immersive elements, seamlessly flowing us into the first real song of the album. Mike's singing voice, something that we haven't seen much of up until this point, is also really clean. He's definitely a bit quiet for my taste, but the song works well enough, so it's not too bad. I also love how Burning in the Skies takes more of a reserved approach to opening this album than Paper Cut, Don't Stay, or Wake did, something that I frankly wasn't really expecting, but it works out very nicely. While Iridescent isn't my favorite single from 1,000 Suns, and one of the aforementioned songs that takes quite a bit of time to get to the point, it at least has a good build-up with a satisfying release of pressure in each chorus. Yeah, I guess that's all I've got in Iridescent. All right, that's enough single talk for now. Let's move on to Robot Boy, a song with chillingly beautiful harmonies. Even if it's a song that I think definitely overstays its welcome, this is one of my favorite performances from Chester, with vocals that sound both uplifting and haunting at the exact same time. Robot Boy is a song that I can only describe as cinematic. If you've ever heard Two Steps from Hell, it sounds like one of their more synth-infused songs. It's got such a cool, cinematic, orchestral, synthy vibe to it. God, that was so many words. Among the electronic experimentation of the album, Blackout feels like an aggressive callback to days of Linkin Park past. I wasn't expecting Chester to be the one rapping on this track, but it works out pretty nicely and keeps us on our toes. That aside, Blackout has some insane remixing in the post-chorus before the bridge, aggressive Chester screams, and a soulful performance from Mike. Of the tracks on 1000 Suns, Blackout feels like it would be one of the more agreeable among Linkin Park fans, and I can see exactly why that is. Now, in terms of songs that I didn't love so much, there are quite a few. See, most of them fall into just kind of being forgettable for me. Songs that I can't really go back and tell you what they sound like. But the one that I had a truly negative experience with that I don't really ever want to listen to again was When They Come For Me, a song that just isn't paced very well if you ask me. When They Come For Me is 5 minutes long, and I personally feel every single one of those minutes drag along. I'm also not personally crazy about the execution of the electronic sound on this song. At a point, some of the static noises just get so overbearing, but that's just my preference. Okay, so that's 1000 Suns, and while it does rank pretty low for me, if I had to take a guess, let's also be clear that this is Linkin Park at the end of the day. There's a certain bar for quality, so even any lowest ranked projects in this video are still at least like a 7 out of 10 for me. So, you know, whatever ranking I give it, please take it with a grain of salt. And I'd appreciate it. Even Linkin Park's worst work is still incredibly solid, so let's keep that in mind as we move forward. Living Things, the 5th studio album from Linkin Park, was released in June of 2012. This one's not too bad. Living Things features that same kind of electronic presence as 1000 Suns, but I'd say for one thing that it's a lot more prevalent, and I'd also say that it is kind of implemented a lot more smoothly. While it does still have those trademark aggressive moments of rock or electronic influence, Living Things also contains a lot of kind of low-key calm tracks. These focus less on Linkin Park's heavier side and more on their ability to create moving melodies, beautiful harmonies, and cinematic instrumentals. Even if the electronic style isn't for you, I do think there is a song for every Linkin Park fan on Living Things. There's something for everybody to enjoy. Something for Everyone starts with the album's 4 singles: Burn It Down, Lost in the Echo, Powerless, and Castle of Glass. Of these 4, the first one to stand out to me is actually the last one, Castle of Glass, yet another song that is so vastly different from anything else I have ever heard from Linkin Park. After my first listen of Living Things a few months ago, this was the first track I gravitated towards and really stuck with. I've listened to a lot of Castle of Glass over the summer, believe me, and for good reason. The piano on this track is awesome as a central instrument, reminding me of what I've done in some circumstances. I also really love Castle of Glass's chorus. Not only are these harmonies chilling and beautiful, but it's something of a catchy melody. It doesn't take too long for this chorus to get stuck in my head. If you've been sleeping on Castle of Glass just like I did for so many years, go give it a shot, because I don't think you'll regret it. Within the singles, Burn It Down is yet another high point and yet another stark contrast to any other lead single in the band's catalog. It's also not what I was expecting at all from a song titled Burn It Down. That's a pretty aggressive set of words, and I was kind of expecting something along the lines of Bleed It Out or Faint. That being said, Burn It Down is one great song in its own right. Chester's voice sounds so damn polished on this track, and while the instrumental in the background does sometimes lean on overbearing and overwhelming, it doesn't ever completely drown out Chester's voice, something that I am personally incredibly grateful for. Powerless was another pleasant surprise in Living Things, a track that sounds like Linkin Park made an Imagine Dragons song. Now, that might sound like a diss if you've seen my video on Imagine Dragons and know my opinions of that band, but hear me out on this one. Chester's safe vocals paired with spacey production and a sort of trap-driven beat is a great combination in the context of this song. Powerless is a moving performance to close out Living Things. This is a song that I can see myself going back to pretty frequently. Rounding out our singles is Lost in the Echo, a song that kind of sounds like it could have been on either Hybrid Theory or Meteora, but it just got remixed in the context of Living Things. It's got a slick flow from Mike, an emotional and angsty performance from Chester, and some insane instrumentals backing it. As a first taste of the new album, as the first track to kick things off, it feels like the band is diving even deeper on that electronic influence. And again, that might not be for everyone, but I, for one, am really enjoying this song. Moving on, let's talk about Victimize, a track that feels more of like an interlude to me than a full fleshed out track. Nevertheless, it carries power with it and flows great on the track list. It almost reminds me of Kingslayer from Bring Me the Horizon in the way that it suddenly shifts from one style of vocals into these really aggressive screams. In a similar vein, Tinfoil also feels like a sort of transitional element, but the reason for that should be a lot more obvious. Instrumental tracks are usually kind of hit or miss for me. Sometimes they help with pacing, sometimes they break your immersion, but in this case, Tinfoil allows us to seamlessly flow from Until It Breaks into Powerless for a smooth close to the album. While it has high points that I do think eclipse those of 1,000 Suns, that's not to say Living Things is a perfect album, so let's talk about some low points, starting with Lies, Greed, Misery, a song that has just a plain distracting beat if you ask me. Now, to give it some credit, I do really enjoy Chester's vocal performance, but the beat just completely overwhelms his softer spoken vocals on the bridge, and Mike's verses just aren't doing that much for me. I also find it to be a really jarring song to follow Burn It Down, but that's just me at the end of the day. All in all, I find Lies, Greed, Misery to be one overwhelming song. And while not nearly as distracting as the beat on Lies, Greed, Misery, Skin to Bone is overbearing in its own right. The beat feels a little too prominent, as if to make Mike's vocals take a back seat, which is a shame because, as I mentioned, I really love his vocals, especially his harmonies on this song, and I wish I could appreciate them more. If we dialed the backing track volume down by like a hair, we probably hit a good balance, but for now, I don't think that's gonna happen, so Skin to Bone is not for me. Finally, another track that I really wasn't fond of was Until It Breaks. Once again, the beat is cool, but it just overpowers Mike's vocals. I want to be able to hear what the man is trying to say. I want to hear him do the damn thing. On top of that, while Chester's performance is solid, it feels like he comes in really late to the song. Until It Breaks also doesn't really ever feel like it amounts to anything, if you ask me. There are a lot of great opportunities for the song to build up and release pressure, but it feels like the song just kind of fizzles away by the time we reach the end. It doesn't feel like there's a satisfying conclusion to Until It Breaks. Alright, I know I just talked some extensive smack about this album, but I do stand by the fact that I think Living Things is definitely a step up from the last one, the 1,000 Suns, that's what it's called. For me, it feels like a lot more consistent of a listen. It feels like a more easy to get into listen, if that makes sense, and it does feel like a perfection on those electronic styles that they were sort of getting the hang of on 1,000 Suns. That's just me though, so if you disagree, that's fine. We've got a few more albums to talk about, so let's move on. In June of 2014, Linkin Park would release their 6th studio album, that being The Hunting Party. And I don't know about you, this album cover is raw as f***. Defining this album stylistically has been pretty difficult for me to do, and the sort of word vomit I came up with, I would call it a nu metal stadium rock country album. Does that make sense? No? Okay, let me explain. Nu metal. At the end of the day, this is probably the only part of that statement that really makes sense, and even if the influence of nu metal is a lot less present and blatant on this album, it's still there. You still have those elements. Stadium rock. With so many prominent and kind of heavier guitars on this album, The Hunting Party sounds like Linkin Park trying to create their own take on that stadium rock style from the mid-2010s. Think of almost like a heavier Smoke and Mirrors by Imagine Dragons or American Beauty by Fall Out Boy. That's at least the easiest way that I can compare. That's what it kind of sounds like to me. Country. This is where I'm gonna turn some heads, frankly. It's something about the guitars specifically that makes me feel like this is kind of a country album. You hear it on some songs, you don't hear it on others. And once you add in any drums or vocals, that comparison doesn't really work as well. So I don't really know why I'm including it in the video, but it was one of the first things I thought about when I queued up this album initially. So I guess we're sticking with it. Anyways, if we keep talking about these genre mishmashes, I'm gonna explode. So let's talk about something else I like on The Hunting Party. That being the stronger presence of Mike Shinoda as a singer. Look, I love me some good rapid-fire Mike Shinoda bars, but there's a time and place for everything, just like Professor Oak said. And in this context, I feel like the rapping isn't as prominent, and that works for the project. I love that we get to hear Mike singing, and I love that we get to hear how far he's come as a singer. I love that we get to see how far his voice has come over the years. It is such a satisfying journey that we've gotten to witness. The Hunting Party also has insanely good pacing, something that has really been a struggle on the last 2 or 3 Linkin Park records. This state is achieved due in part to the transitions between every single track, which makes The Hunting Party a seamless listen from front to back. If you ask me, this album is possibly their best paced work since Hybrid Theory, something that I also attribute to the presence of the marching snare on the album. The marching snare can be overbearing, don't get me wrong, but in the context of The Hunting Party, it's used surprisingly appropriately. The Hunting Party consists of 5 singles, those being Guilty All the Same, Until It's Gone, Wastelands, Rebellion, and Final Masquerade. This is one stacked lineup if you ask me, but the song that I want to start with is Guilty All the Same, a song where true musicianship and musical passion shines. Everyone's performances on the song are so damn polished, from the near 2-minute intro into Chester's emotional verses and the marching snare to lead us into each chorus. It almost reminds me of The Emptiness Machine and how the chorus initially starts off with vocals and limited instrumentals before swelling into a grander instrumental and release of pressure. Until It's Gone is yet another high point within the singles, a song that sounds like it could have come right off of Meteora. Like, just listen to the intro of the song, tell me it doesn't sound like Numb. And I know that's not the first time I've said that in this video, but trust me. Beyond that though, Until It's Gone also feels like it could have come off of Living Things or 1,000 Suns with its stronger electronic influence. Needless to say, it's an incredibly diverse track, but it fits in so perfectly as an intricate piece of The Hunting Party. Chester's lyrics are moving, the drums drive the song forward, the guitars are intense and powerful. What is not to love with Until It's Gone? The Hunting Party keeps things moving with Rebellion, a true testament to what I think is Linkin Park's love for genuine musicianship. If you've ever heard a song from Dragon Force, that's what Rebellion reminds me of right off the rip. While maybe not as intricate or insane as one of those songs, having such a strong presence of technical guitar makes me think of that band immediately. Mike and Chester harmonize and play off of one another so effortlessly as well. All of these really come together to form one powerful song in the form of Rebellion. Now, a few songs in this video I've described as cinematic, and another one that I'm going to describe as cinematic is Final Masquerade. In a similar vein to what I've done, Final Masquerade feels like a very theatrical track to bring us into the close of The Hunting Party. Dynamics are a strong suit of the song, with Linkin Park using loud blasts of sound and silence to highlight key points of the song. Once again, instrumentation and musicianship are knocked out of the park on this song. I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again for Final Masquerade. What's not to love? Aside from the singles, one song that I've really been loving is Keys to the Kingdom, the aggressive and grimy opening track of the album. I'm not normally one for weird vocal filters, but whatever they've got on Chester's voice in the intro of this song is so damn cool. It almost feels like a transitional element, as if to signify the shift in tone and sound from Living Things into The Hunting Party. Once again, Mike gets a chance to shine as a singer on this song with some beautiful harmonies and flow leading into Chester's aggressive chorus. I feel like it's been such a hot minute since we've had this outgoing and aggressive of a performance from Chester, making Keys to the Kingdom an incredibly fresh breath of air. Directly following Keys to the Kingdom is All for Nothing, an example of a song where I hear that slight country influence, primarily in how the guitar and the drums play off of one another. I swear, if Mike had a southern accent, I know some of you guys would hear the country influence too. Trust me, just picture Mike with a Tennessee twang. Either way, All for Nothing is a pretty fun song with grimy guitars, gang vocals, and a really good balance between singing and rapping for Mike. Beyond that, I don't really have all that much to say, it's just a banger, trust me. As far as weaker moments on the album go, there's really only one song that I take issue with, and that would be War. Personally, it's just a little bit intense for me, to be honest. It's also over before I know what's happening, like it feels like I can't wait to get to the finish line. I'm not sure I'd ever skip over it on future listens, but it does feel like an atomic bomb going off right in the middle of the hunting party and then immediately decaying, like no mushroom cloud left whatsoever. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was not expecting to enjoy that album as much as I did. My expectations weren't necessarily low going into this project, but it does feel, at least in my preference, that we've been on sort of a downward spiral as far as quality goes for Linkin Park albums. But The Hunting Party took that mindset, flipped it on its head, and gave me one insanely cool record. So, bravo, lads, bravo. 2017 saw the release of One More Light, the 7th studio album from Linkin Park. Aside from The Hunting Party, this is the only album on this list that I hadn't listened to prior to this video. As I understand it, One More Light is a pretty divisive and controversial album, and I can see why that would be. Once again, One More Light is incredibly different from anything else in the Linkin Park catalog. In this case, It has a heavy pop-driven influence with those a little electronic twinges here and there. Once again, fans of Meteora and Hybrid Theory probably aren't too crazy about this album, but for me, it's kind of neat. I do also want to mention that this is one of Linkin Park's shortest albums, with 10 songs clocking in at just over 35 minutes. That being said, the pacing isn't bad whatsoever. One More Light doesn't feel like it closes out prematurely or fails to deliver a satisfying collection of songs. At the end of the day, I would much rather 10 amazing songs that work well together and create one good cohesive unit than 13 to 16 songs that just feel jumbled and sloppily thrown together. I think quantity over quality is, no, wait, I got that wrong. I think quality over quantity is so damn important, and One More Light is no exception to that. Now, while I've never listened to One More Light in full, I have heard scattered songs in the past, and my reception of those was pretty positive, so I had positive hopes for this album, and they were pretty much completely met right on the line where I was expecting. The style they're going for with this album feels so simple, but distinct at the same time, and I really do think that One More Light features some of their best and most poignant songwriting to date. One More Light contains the shortest collection of singles yet, just 3 of them. Those singles are Heavy, Talking to Myself, and One More Light. Let's start with the lead single, Heavy. This is a perfect featuring track if you ask me. I love when songs with a feature don't just feel like 2 artists on the same track, but like a conversation between the 2 vocalists. In this case, Heavy uses Chester and Kiara to contextualize fixating on oneself, as if the 2 singers are venting their frustrations to one another. Like I said, it feels like a dialogue, like there's more of a flow to Heavy's lyrics than just 2 vocalists going back and forth. Obviously, we can't talk about One More Light, the album, without talking about One More Light, the song. While I wouldn't consider One More Light, the song, to be an easy listen whatsoever, as a piece of the greater album as a whole, it's powerful and moving. I would normally criticize a track like this for not building up to a grand release of pressure for the final chorus, but in the context of One More Light, where somber and emotional lyrics take the forefront, I think it's way more effective to keep things on the instrumental side calm and somber. Moving away from singles for a bit, let's talk about one of the songs that I actually knew before listening to this album in full, that being Nobody Can Save Me. Earlier I compared one of their songs to Imagine Dragons, and that's very much what Nobody Can Save Me feels like. Once again, I don't mean that in a bad sense. In this context, Nobody Can Save Me has a great pop-driven sound with some powerful drums to keep the tempo moving. Like it or not, Imagine Dragons is good at creating those powerful songs, and that's exactly what I feel like I hear with Nobody Can Save Me. Especially as an opener to One More Light, this is one effective track. Battle Symphony, on the other hand, was a high point that I wasn't expecting. This is an excellent performance from Chester, both as a singer and a songwriter. Even if the song is written quite simply, I don't think this subject matter demands any sort of complicated themes. I also personally love how the electronic influence is implemented on this track, almost like it was inspired by dubstep with a drop in each chorus. Invisible, on the other hand, lets my boy Mike get some time in the spotlight. Like I've mentioned before, I think his singing voice is heavily underrated, and Invisible is my evidence of that. His performance feels so emotional and vulnerable, perfect for the subject matter of the song. On that note, the subject matter is incredibly moving, discussing the relationship between a child and a parent. Sometimes it's on you to have those hard conversations as a parent, and even though you know what you're saying is right, it can suck when your kid doesn't see it that way and takes their frustration out on you. It's a topic I feel like I haven't seen all that many songs about, and I love that the emphasis is on support, on love, and honesty in all these conversations. Invisible is one moving song, man, you cannot convince me otherwise. If there's any song on One More Light that I wasn't too fond of, it would probably be Good Goodbye, but that does come with an asterisk. Personally, I think Good Goodbye is a pretty congested track. With 3 total artists, 4 if you're counting Mike and Chester as separate vocalists, the song feels like it's dying for some breathing room, but beyond that, the song is moving, so I guess that's enough for me. I see a lot of fans getting upset when their favorite artists switch things up from the norm, usually in the form of trying out a different style of music. And I get that to an extent, but I also think following specific musical artists would be really boring if they just did the same thing for 20 years. I love Hybrid Theory and Meteora as much as anybody else, but if I want to hear songs that sound like those, I will just go listen to those projects. I want to hear something innovative and new that I haven't heard before, and that's exactly what I love about One More Light. It's melodic, it's beautifully written, it is just amazing from front to back. This also does mark an important and tragic part of Linkin Park's history, because in July of 2017, just 2 months after the release of One More Light, Chester Bennington, the lead singer, would take his own life. The band would cancel the remainder of their world tour in support of One More Light, hosting one final tribute concert in October of the same year to celebrate Chester's life. And after that, the band went on indefinite hiatus for years. Now, I want to use this point in the video to remind you that if you are feeling down in your luck, if you feel like everything is falling apart around you, you are never truly alone. There is always a light at the end of the tunnel if you just push on through. In the description of this video, I've left links to suicide hotlines for every nation. I've also left a link of mental health resources for US residents. If you're not from the US and you know mental health resources for other nations, please put them in the comments. I promise we'll bring attention to them. You are never truly alone. Please take care of yourselves out there. While they never formally broke up, releasing reissues and B-sides and demos over the years, there was never any chatter about upcoming tour dates or reunions or anything of the sort, which changed in 2024 when their website was taken over with a mysterious countdown timer. This led to a discreet performance for Linkin Park fan club members, the revelation of their new vocalists, and the announcement of their first album in 7 years, From Zero, which was slated for a November release. Now look, artists come back from breakups every year now like it's nothing, and sometimes it's with a really effective, really genuine, exciting comeback project, and sometimes it's just kind of with something that falls flat. More than anything though, I wanted this new Linkin Park album, this comeback album From Zero, to be an 11 out of 10 return album that knocked my socks off. But that's just not the case for me, unfortunately. If you ask me, From Zero is an incredibly inconsistent album. There are a lot of high points, don't get me wrong, but for every high point, there's some forgettable track that just falls between the cracks. Even with its high points, it struggles from what I'm calling minutes to midnight syndrome in that its production feels incredibly safe. I guess that makes sense in the context of bringing on a new vocalist for the very first time, but nearly 25 years since the band's explosive debut, I do sort of expect more innovation from the guys that have been there for 25 years. I think the best way that I can kind of contextualize this album is that it feels kind of directionless sometimes. And let me explain. Here, take a look at this. From Zero is an album that contains Two-Faced, Overflow, Casualty, and Over Each Other. These 4 songs feel so vastly different from one another. And while I'm not saying that you can't have an album that rapidly changes styles like that, with how short From Zero is, it is awfully jarring and there's not that much transition time between these different styles. And of course, for the Emily in the room, let's talk about Emily Armstrong, the new vocalist of Linkin Park. Depending where you look online, there is a bit of controversy surrounding this singer, and while I feel some of it is warranted, some of it I don't necessarily understand. Like I said, some of it is quite valid. I personally agree that I do not love her affiliation with the Church of Scientology and Danny Masterson whatsoever, and it's something that even swayed me from checking out Linkin Park's return in the first place. Additionally, while I won't say that I even begin to understand what it's like to be in the shoes of the Bennington family, I can understand why they'd have distaste towards a new vocalist being introduced into Linkin Park. That being said, for every valid piece of criticism I see on Emily, there's at least 2 posts that just add something completely unconstructive or just end up being blatantly sexist or contain arguments with no strength behind them whatsoever. As far as I'm concerned, Emily is a powerful and confident vocalist that fits in with this new era of Linkin Park perfectly. The band isn't trying to replace Chester. They've been very clear about that from day one. Anyways, let's just move on, because if I keep going down this route, I'm gonna lose even more hair than I already have. From Zero has 4 singles, those being The Emptiness Machine, Heavy as the Crown, Over Each Other, and Two-Faced. There are a lot of great places that we could start here, but let's start with the song that brought it all back, The Emptiness Machine. Is there another song that Linkin Park could have made a comeback with? Yeah, there is one more, but we'll talk about that later. The Emptiness Machine is a song that I love for its pacing and use of dynamics, especially in that first verse and chorus. The softer dynamics building up into a grand release of pressure to introduce Emily Armstrong as a new vocalist is pretty badass, to say the least. Mike and Emily also play off of one another pretty smoothly in the second half of the song, with some subtle harmonies and a little bit of call and response action. By far, however, if I have a favorite song on From Zero, it has got to be Heavy as the Crown. In my Imagine Dragons video last year, I talked about how much I love the music of League of Legends, and while I would never touch that game with a 10-foot pole, Heavy as the Crown is no exception. The World Championship anthem for League of 2024. It's upbeat, it's badass, Mike has some faint level flow. This is one powerful song. That being said, it does have the problem I mentioned before, where it doesn't feel like it fits in. on From Zero. It feels very dissonant from a lot of other songs on the album. And it even feels like it just kind of got tacked on after they made that song for League of Legends, but that's just me. There are other songs on From Zero that feel a lot more jarring than Heavy is the Crown, so it's not too egregious. Now, remember when I said that there was another song on From Zero that could have rivaled The Emptiness Machine as a reliable comeback song? This is that song. It's Two-Faced. As everyone on the internet has already so kindly pointed out, Two-Faced feels like it came straight off of Hybrid Theory, eerily similar to One Step Closer. Like, shockingly, mind-numbingly similar. Moments of these two songs sound exactly the same, and matching the two songs together is probably an easy layup for a viral YouTube video. Nevertheless, it's an incredibly high point of From Zero, bringing back that grimy, nu metal sound that kickstarted Linkin Park's fame and success 25 years prior. Aside from the singles, the track that I'm really fond of is Cut the Bridge, one that I used to consider my favorite off the entire album. Nowadays, it doesn't necessarily hold that title anymore, but it's still a song that I'm quite fond of. While I don't really love Mike's performance or flow on this song, I am quite fond of Emily's, as well as the pacing of the song as a whole. The Emptiness Machine is an upbeat and energetic start to the record, and Cut the Bridge is successful in keeping things moving following it. I think my favorite part of the song, however, is the chorus with Emily's belt and the sort of bold repetition of Cut It Down. Normally that repetition is something that would really bug me on a song, but in the context of Cut the Bridge, where it's more of a background element than a main lyric, it works perfectly fine. Now, I know that I said From Zero is a pretty safe and unintuitive album as far as production goes, but one track that doesn't follow that rule is Overflow. Linkin Park did a great job creating an atmospheric and spacey song with Overflow, and while it might not be catchy or head boppy or radio ready, it's a song that I find to be breathtaking regardless. Emily's vocals lean on the more soft-spoken side, which is such a cool contrast given how aggressive she often ends up being on Linkin Park songs, and Mike's singing voice gets some time to shine too. And while it's not my favorite closer on any Linkin Park album by any means, Good Things Go is a pretty satisfying conclusion to From Zero. It does take a bit long to get to the point, but the song has such a great build-up from start to finish. When that final chorus comes in, it is a gut punch of power and noise and color. Good Things Go might also feature my favorite performance from Emily across the entirety of From Zero. She sustains those high notes so well, she never falters to breathiness, and she keeps the aggression, something that I imagine has to be quite difficult for any singer, especially in that high of an octave. Now, generally, I do think that From Zero has some pretty weak and underwhelming bonus tracks, but the one that has really stuck with me and the one that I really enjoy is Up From the Bottom, a song that feels a little more pop-punky than Linkin Park is used to. I guess it's easier to get something like this on the radio than something like Casualties, so I get it. Regardless, I do love the style and the pacing. Up From the Bottom is fast-paced, almost hard to keep up with at times. This is one I go back to pretty frequently, even when I'm not listening to the album as a whole. Now, we already talked about how From Zero is an inconsistent listen as far as tone is concerned, but the same thing goes for quality. There are two songs that really just struggle to keep my interest, starting with Casualty. Similarly to War on the Hunting Party, it's just a wee bit aggressive for my tastes. Whenever Casualty comes on, I feel like I lose concentration on what I'm doing, which is bad because more often than not when I'm listening to music, I'm driving. It's just such an overbearing song for me. Mike's vocals feel a bit cheesy to me as well, but that's just a personal preference. On the other hand, Emily's vocals are a perfect fit for Casualty. She just absolutely crushes it on this song. The other weak point for me would be Stained, a song that I feel like has nightmarish pacing. While just over 3 minutes, Stained is a song that I feel like truly overstays its welcome, taking way too long to get to the point. It's not particularly catchy, and it doesn't particularly have any sort of exciting production. It's just okay. That was a shockingly bipolar experience. I do look back on From Zero quite fondly because it was the first Linkin Park record cycle that I really paid attention to and that I was really a part of. But man, this was a way tougher listen than I remember it being. That's neither here nor there. However, we're just about at the end of the video, so let's move on to the part that you're all waiting for. Let's rank these suckers. Ranking all 8 of Linkin Park's albums has been incredibly difficult, because I think Linkin Park has a very loyal fan base, and I'm worried that any opinion I have will be taken and ran with. So if it upsets you, I'm sorry in advance, but there we go. Number 8, 1,000 Suns. While I wouldn't fully call it a miss, I do think 1,000 Suns is a bit of an intimidating listen. With some better pacing, it could work a lot better for me, but for now, it's not an album that I'm super eager to go back to. Number 7, Minutes to Midnight. At one point, this was number 8 on the list, but I do think that its high points eclipse those of A Thousand Suns. Again, it all just kind of boils down to a lack of innovation for me. It feels like something that I've heard a million times before. So sorry. Number 6, From Zero. If you'd asked me 11 months ago where I'd be ranking this among the other Linkin Park albums, I never would have predicted it in the bottom half, but here we are. As far as individual songs go, From Zero has a lot of really fun and enjoyable heaters, but as a collective, cohesive unit, it just feels a little too inconsistent and disorganized for my tastes. Number 5, Living Things. Like I said, this was a direct improvement on its predecessor, and a pretty big one at that. Pacing improves, the electronic style becomes more defined, Mike gets more chances to sing. Across the board, Living Things is a great project and an awesome example of a step up of growth. Number 4, One More Light. Look, I stand by my opinion that this is some of Linkin Park's best songwriting to date. Every song is so moving and emotional in ways that they haven't been able to replicate before or after. Number 3, The Hunting Party. Wholly underrated. Batman. I was not expecting The Hunting Party to go just as hard as it did. In some ways, it felt like a return to form, with a focus on the aggressive rock that kickstarted their career. Once again, what's not to love? Number 2, Meteora. As you can probably imagine, the spot for number 1 was a bloodbath, because these two albums are basically on the same level for me, but today, Meteora's taken home the number 2 spot. I guess it's just less iconic to me than the number 1 album, but I can see the argument for it moving up a slot. It can really depend on the day. And number 1, Hybrid Theory. Look, you probably saw this coming from a mile away, and honestly, I don't blame you at all. For as long as I've been listening to Linkin Park, this has been my favorite album from them. You just can't beat Hybrid Theory. It's too damn good. Without a shadow of a doubt, this has been one of my most fun and exciting episodes of I Listen to Blank So You Don't Have To that I've ever gotten to produce, with just how diverse Linkin Park's discography has been over the years. Their sound completely changes in ways that not many artists are able to achieve. I think the only one that comes to mind is like Panic at the Disco, and that project felt like it really paled in comparison to Linkin Park. Either way, it was an incredibly meaningful listening journey for me, and I hope it is for you too, whether you've listened to it 25 years ago, whether you listen to it today, or whether you listen to it a week from now. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.